Lovely to meet everyone today and welcome to our 8th Lunch and Learn. It's great to see so many of you on the call and also those that will be watching the recording later on as well. To introduce myself, I'm Lindsay. I'm a food waste prevention specialist within WRAP's Food System Transformation team, and I'm joined on the call today by my colleagues Emma and Hugh. So today's session is all about why should we bother looking at food waste, and we're delighted to be joined by Ed, the head of sustainability at Wells & Co, who's going to share how his business has approached food waste reduction and why it's become an important part of delivering operational efficiency, building resilience, and creating commercial value. We'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end of the session, so please use the Q&A function throughout the call and we'll answer as many of the questions as we can at the end. So there is the Q&A section and there's the chat section. We ask that you put your questions in the Q&A section. That allows us to make sure that we can put them directly to Ed. So the session is scheduled to finish around 12:30, but we will stay online for a few minutes afterwards. So if anybody has any additional questions for Ed or the WRAP team, then we can cover them then. Okay, so on the slide here, I just have a few stats. As I say, we're looking at the hospitality sector today, and we know that there's no shortage of pressures on businesses within the sector. Food prices continue to fluctuate, energy and labour costs remain high, and supplier pricing is becoming increasingly unpredictable. And many of these costs are simply outside of our control. But what is within our control is our food waste and what we do with it. So food waste typically costs hospitality businesses between 2 and 6% of their annual turnover. And when we look at the true cost, we can attribute a figure of around £4 for every kilogram of food wasted, which includes associated costs, including labour, utilities, disposal, etc. So while we can't control inflation or energy prices, we can control how we efficiently use the food that we are purchasing. And that's exactly what why WRAP established the Food Waste Reduction Roadmap and the Food and Drink Pact to provide businesses with practical frameworks that are focused around Target, Measure, Act, that provide guidance, toolkits, peer learning, best practice, how to help accelerate food waste reduction across the trifecta of commerciality, social and environmental impact. So there is QR codes here that you can click if you want to get in touch with us regarding the pact or the roadmap, but also we'll make sure that the information is shared as well. So that's enough from me. I'm delighted to introduce Ed, who has worked closely with WRAP to strengthen the approach of food waste prevention across Wells & Co. So without further ado, Ed, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in. As Lindsay says, my name is Ed, and I work for a fifth-generation family business in Bedfordshire called Wells & Co. We do two things, really. We brew great beer and we run great pubs. And I'm here to talk to you about the food waste project we've taken on over really the last 2 years and the benefits it's brought to our business. So let me bring up my slide deck quickly. We go into presenter mode and it will let me. There we go. I think we're set.
That's perfect, Ed. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Lindsay. So there we go. I think we're at quite an interesting point in the sustainability game. And I've started calling it Sustainability 2.0. I think the time for having a dedicated little sustainability corner of the business has passed. And it's now up to sustainability nerds like me to demonstrate our value by integrating ourselves into the real fabric of the business, becoming part of the daily operations. And I think there are three key drivers by which we can do that. The first, I think, is quite self-explanatory, but it's efficiency. So simply put, the less resource we use, the less resource we need to buy. It is that simple. So if we can run lean when it comes to energy, water, the machinery we purchase to brew beer and cook our food on, and even the labor and the waste, just by tightly controlling those costs, not only can that reduce our carbon footprint, but it can be an obvious win for our P&L as well. So when I'm prioritizing sustainability objectives, I'm unashamed to say that if it doesn't make money or save money, it's probably not going to be a high priority at this point in time. Second driver for me is this idea of resilience. And Lindsay touched on it in her intro here. We are finding our supply chains to be more and more volatile. It's been a roller coaster during COVID and ever since. And we have shortage of things like cooking ingredients and CO2 to brew our beer with. So we are used to these disruptions now, and sadly we should be used to them. I don't see any sign of the things sort of smoothing out in the near future. So as a business, it's our job to become more resilient to those supply chain perturbations. If we don't act, we are going to see things like the crops that we brew beer with become harder to source, the ingredients that we cook our food with. So the more resource that we can actually generate ourselves, for instance, whether that's solar energy on our rooftops, we've just signed off the capex for CO2 recapture technology in our brew house, which I'm really excited before. All of this reduces our reliance on the outside world essentially and makes us more resilient to that roller coaster that is our supply chain at present. And then the third driver, and I think the one that really gets me out of bed in the morning, is I think you could say brand here. I would also substitute the word purpose to be just as valuable. So we know that sadly, a lot of young people in particular these days are riddled with eco anxiety, and I don't blame them. They know that things are serious and they are struggling to find ways to do something about it. And I think this is where our industry can really add some value. I think if you are coming into hospitality hoping to get rich at the moment, I've got bad news for you. You can probably do that more easily elsewhere, but that's not the reason we do this work. This soundbite down the bottom here really stuck with me. I saw this at the start of the year, that more than 4 in 10 workers have aged between 18 and 27 have either turned down a job or just decided not to apply because that potential employer doesn't meet their values when it comes to ethics. They've considered them unethical. So if we sit on our hands as a business and do nothing when it comes to sustainability, we might be missing out on valuable hires without even realizing it. They just won't get in touch. So that can't be the case. So we know that consumers, quote above here, are relying on us to do the right thing when it comes to people and planet. So I view a big part of my role is not just doing the work, but broadcasting it and encouraging people who share our people and planet values to align with us here at Wells & Co. So tying together those three themes, we've got efficiency, we've got resilience, and we've got brand, is, if it'll let me move the slide, the work we've done on food waste in our managed pubs here in the UK. Bit more context for you. Again, Lindsay's kind of touched on it, but you will have heard, I'm sure, some shocking stats when it comes to food waste. So as a species, we waste up to 30% of the food that we produce. I think it's 30, but yeah, well, about 1/3 of the food we produce goes to waste every year through food waste and food loss. And that accounts for about 30% of all greenhouse gases when you look at the global food system. So there's a huge number of unnecessary greenhouse gases being produced. Within the hospitality industry, it's responsible for over 10% of global food waste. And within the UK industry, 20% of food purchased for sale doesn't end up in a customer's happy belly, it ends up in the bin. And as we'll come to, I ran the numbers a couple of years ago and I realised at Wells & Co we were about on that trend. So I saw tackling food waste as a great way to bring what we call our triple bottom line ethos to life in our pubs for our colleagues and our customers. And briefly, triple bottom line simply means that rather than focusing on the traditional singular bottom line, which is profit, we are now challenging ourselves to factor people, planet, and profit concerns into every decision that we make as a business. And sometimes there could be trade-offs, for instance, between profit and planet or profit and people, but not in this case. It struck me as common sense. If we can tackle the amount of food waste that reduces our carbon footprint, it boosts our P&L, everyone's a winner. So the first thing we did, and I have to give a huge shout out to RAP here because it's very much their protocol that we followed, was to conduct our first annual Wells & Co food waste audit. And we did that in the month of August. I picked August 2 summers ago because it felt like a kind of average month. We know it's not Christmas, it's also not January. And it felt like a time when the pubs weren't being tasked. We didn't have a World Cup on at that point, so the pubs weren't being tasked with too much other, and they could give the focus they needed to the wrap process. So I'll leave you to explore Guardians of Grub wrap if you haven't already. I can't recommend it highly enough. But briefly, for the month of August, we got our pubs to split their food waste. Instead of it all going into one bin, we got them to divide it into 3 bins. And that way we found out the proportion of spoilage we were producing. So if we had food going out of date in our fridges, or a carton of eggs gets dropped on the kitchen floor and smashed, that would go in the spoilage bin. Prep waste is as it sounds. It's offcuts from vegetables. It's other bits from the preparation of the food we serve. And then the bit I was most excited to explore was plate waste. So if we give our customers too many chips, they don't eat all those chips, and those chips go in the bin. That's plate waste. Nice and simple. And I suspected that plate waste would be the lion's share of our total food waste total. And I was right. It wasn't actually as high as I'd anticipated. We were 56% plate waste, 26% prep waste, which is higher than I'd expected, and then the other 18% was spoilage. So we still knew that plate waste was over half of our total waste generation on a given month. So right away, that helped us to prioritize steps to mitigate that waste. So we knew that we needed to look at team training, and that's around things like the dish spec, what they are told to plate up, kitchen skills, when we're looking at knife skills, things like that, and particularly margins and portion control. We know how easy it is. You're slammed, it's a busy Friday night in the pub, you want to people please, and before you know it, you're piling chips high on a plate without really thinking about margins at that point. And that was one of the areas that we suspected we could probably tighten down on. So in terms of action, we went at this from a few angles. I love Wrap's cost saving skills course. You can go, following this call, you can go on the Guardians of Grub website. You can complete this module yourself. It takes about 15 minutes. It's free. And I think it gives a really good overview of the scale of the food waste crisis, what as a hospitality business you can do to tackle it, how a food waste audit might form part of that strategy, and then kind of the bare bones of how you would conduct that audit. So I love this, and I thought I want to get all our colleagues to go through the cost saving skills course. But if I send a little pleading email and ask them to do it, some will, some won't. I won't know who has and who hasn't. So what we did was work with Wrap to get the course set up on our internal training platform, WellSmart. That way it sits alongside every other training module that our colleagues do. So in the month of July last year, we had overnight is now 100%, but in that month alone, we got over 95% of our UK operations team from Rob, our ops director, downwards to complete the course. So no one can say they're unaware of the issue of food waste or what we're planning to do to tackle it. Because it's hosted on WellSmart, I can track that compliance. And with Izzy, our L&D lead, we were chasing the people to make sure it got done. And it now forms part of their annual refresher training. So they'll have to do GDPR training, cost training, heavy lifting, and food waste. So it's not Ed's special little training course off to the side. It's now part of business as usual here at Wells & Co. Also worked with Craig, our head chef, who is really passionate about sustainability. And last summer, he put on these excellent margin management masterclasses. And we got all the head chefs from our UK managed pubs to our Bedford HQ, Brewpoint. So this wasn't disseminated remote training. We wanted to get everyone in person for a whole day and really immerse ourselves in this topic of food waste. And Craig put together a great agenda that explained why margin is so important to the chefs, the key influences on margin control, and then what some of the steps the team can take to improve those margins. I mentioned portion control before, and Craig came up with a very clever exercise for us, which was just to bring in a tray of cooked chips, a scoop of an unspecified volume, and go, right, who can eyeball 100 grams of chips? And no one could. I was one of the worst. I think I went about 140 grams. So if you're hungry, come and see me. But the point was to illustrate in a very common sense way how easy it is to go beyond the dish spec and end up losing margin through poor portion control. So that really helped bring it to life for the chefs. And then they can go back, cascade that whole day of training to their kitchen teams. And suddenly we've got the whole business on board and really focused on margins and portion control. Following that, we did Ed's Chip Challenge. I don't remember how I dreamt this up, but it was good fun. So the idea was we knew that chips were going to be a focus for us. We serve a lot of chips. And when I talked to the managers during the summer 24 food waste audit and said, look, anecdotally, what's piling up in your bins? They said pizza crust and chips. I'm still working out what to do about pizza crust. It's a tricky one. But chips are something, if we are reliably giving our customers too many chips, then that's a simple fix, actually. So the chip challenge, the idea was to try and work out how which pub could get the closest to optimal portion control. So I'm making up numbers here, but we found that, let's say that a portion of fish and chips in our pub should have 100 grams of chips with it. What we found from our baseline data, we took data from the first 6 months of last financial year, was that on average, we were giving about 125 grams of chips with that portion. So we were wastage of 25% when it came to chips. And so we challenged the pubs in the month of July last year, who can get as close to 100 grams as possible effectively. I should have called it our carb challenge because it also included rosti and tater tots and hash brown and other things like that. But chip challenge just had a better ring to it. So we stuck with that. And we found in that month, as the old saying goes, what gets measured gets managed. Just by having this focus on chips, we weren't perfect, but we reduced that wastage by almost 10%. So we went from 25% down to 16.5% overportioning. If you extrapolate that over a year, that would save us almost £3,000. And that's just on chips. I know that within a pub estate, £3,000 isn't life-changing money, but it brought to life for the guys. If you really watch these details, it can really stack up when it comes to your P&L. And my message, honestly, to the pubs throughout is that if you want to hit your bonus targets, get your Christmas bonus, the low-hanging fruit to get there is probably back of house. It's awesome that you're upselling, you're getting bums on seats, and we're driving dessert sales and cocktail sales and all this good stuff. But actually, if you really watch the waste at the back of house, that might be your fastest route to an improved P&L. So what do we find off the back of all this? Now, candidly, one of the things we found is that it's really hard to measure food waste accurately. But I work with Craig. We use an in-house stock control inventory platform called Indicator. Some of you may do the same. And Craig ran some numbers on there and found that when you look at the wastage on Indicator, we had apparently achieved a reduction in wastage of 27% versus the previous year. So again, extrapolate that over a year, and we'd be looking at a saving of £55,000. So this is how you get your ops team's attention. You don't talk about carbon footprints, you don't talk about emissions, you don't talk about CO2, you talk about money. And that's what we've been careful to do all along. And that's how we've brought the business along for the ride. It's been tough times in hospitality. It feels like our profit margin has been trying to erode it from every angle over the last year and beyond. But despite that, our dry gross profit percentage went up by 0.9% in the 12 months we were undertaking all this food waste work. And if you factor in, adjust for inflation over that time, which was quite significant, it's a 3.6% improvement. Now, a number of variables go into that. We can't take all the credit for food waste, but Craig was adamant that the food waste had definitely played a significant role in that. So yes, a tricky one to kind of tease out all the variables and really go X has influenced Y, but we can be very confident from these figures that it's had a real positive impact for our business. What was really nice in November was we won an award off the back of all this. The National, it's a bit of a mouthful, the National Innovation in Training Award, Sustainability Training Award. I'm not in this photo because Muggins here got COVID that week. So I was sitting at home coughing my guts out. I was gutted. I'd never been in and the winner is situation before, and it happened without me. But doesn't take away from a great result. And really, it was off the back of seeing what I've just shown you and showing how we brought our whole business along for the journey here. What was particularly satisfied, second from left in the photo here is my colleague Roz, and we were there at the NEATers 12 months prior to support a colleague in a different category. I didn't know at that point till they went, and now for the Sustainability Training Award finalists. And I turned to Roz and said, okay, I've got an idea for this around food waste, hold my beer. And 12 months later, we came back and won the thing. So that was a really nice kind of story arc to bring back to the business and go, look, all your efforts this summer, I know it's been a pain having to sort food into these 3 bins, but look how it's paid off. And look how we're actually doing pioneering stuff in the industry. And our little regional pub company and brewery is kind of punching above his weight when it comes to sustainability. So all credit to RAP for all the support along the journey. And we're not done yet. If this is your first intro to our business, I'd really encourage you. Released our inaugural sustainability report last autumn. So if you search out Wells and Co online, sustainability, you'll see an awkward little video of me talking to the camera, and then we've got a link to some of the key projects we've done, and you can download a PDF of this report. And the work continues. So I'm already working on with our board now on new KPIs for the year to come, across a whole raft of activity across the business. I think the work we've done with food waste is a major catalyst for getting sustainability more ingrained across Wells and Co. And it's having this relentless commercial focus on it. I care deeply about the environment. I hope everyone else in our business does too, but money makes the world go round. So I think if I can give one totally unsolicited bit of advice from this, is to convert everything you do into pounds and pence, because that's how you demonstrate the value to a commercially led business. And if we are not a business making a profit, we are not a sustainable business. So it sounds a little cheesy, but this is the 150th year of our family business. We were founding in 1876, and I'm talking more and more now about how we ensure that our business is really fit for the next 150 years. I want the next generation to inherit a business they can feel really proud of. And I think this has been a big stepping stone on that journey. That's me. Thank you very much for listening.
Amazing, Ed. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. And congratulations on the award. It's a true demonstration of it brings to life all of the work that you and the team have done. Um, so Ed has mentioned Guardians of Grub and the resources there a few times on the call. We'll make sure that the link's shared, but it is just www.guardiansofgrub.co.uk, and all of the resources on that website are free and available to be downloaded. As I say, if you want to reach out to the RAP team for further information on how you use them, etc., then it would be great to hear from you. So that's enough from me. We'll go over to Q&A now. Emma, have we any calls or any questions? Sorry.
Yes, we've got a question around portion control and engagement of chefs and staff. Ed, what would be your one recommendation or kind of prompt or nudge to reinforce them sticking to the correct portion sizes?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's an ongoing battle. It's not something I think you can train the team on once and consider it done, not least because hospitality inherently has high turnover. So 6 months later, you'll have different people working in your kitchen, and we need to keep banging that drum. I think if I were to give one tip, as I say, full credit to Craig, our head chef, for this very hands-on, visceral exercise of going, can you eyeball a scoop of chips accurately? And the answer is almost certainly not. Please, if that works for you, if you serve chips or anything else you scoop, take that royalty free and use it, because I think it's such a nice way of bringing things to life in a kitchen. And I think, yeah, just adding that commercial angle to it. So things like the chip challenge, if you can think of fun ways to challenge people, to incentivize people to really manage their portion control, make a bit of a competition for it. I think that can be really encouraging. And the other bit our managers taught us was actually you can get a head start on portion control during quiet periods in the pubs. One of the managers was saying that she will portion out tater tot portions at 3 in the afternoon when there's not much going on, because then the staff can't grab 200% portion when it's busy, if you like. So you can do a bit of prep and kind of stack the odds in favour of success when it comes to portion control.
Yeah, bringing the fun to the training always helps, doesn't it? Okay, we've got another question. Have you got a guide, and this might be for Ed, it might be for Lindsay or Hugh. Is there a guide that shows common wasted food and its spoilage rate and storage best practices?
I would defer to you guys on that one. Sorry to pass the buck, but
No, it's fine. There's lots of resources out there. As I say, Guardians of Grub, the website has lots of information there. Looks at some of the key areas. As Ed has said, carbohydrates and garnishes are the two areas that we see the biggest waste areas in. There is a massive, detailed, fantastic report that RAP did back in 2012, which was the true cost of food waste, and it really drives down into the nuances and what drives food waste and where it's driven. So from plate waste to prevention or to preparation, etc. So not a relatively new piece of research, but a really fundamental piece of research, which is still coded and used around the food waste prevention work globally at the moment. So yeah, that's available on the RAF website as well.
I think that's everything we've got through at the moment. Please do, anyone else, if you've got any other questions, please do feed those through the Q&A.
Ed, I have a question for you. So, in terms of all of the competing challenges and roles and activities that I suppose back of house team have to do, how did you get the team on board to see that this had a part to play? As obviously you talked about bonuses and stuff, but is there any activities that you did specifically for the back of house team in this area?
So bluntly, the first thing I did in 2024, no, late 23, was to sit down with a few of my colleagues and work out what value of food we thought we chucked in the bin that year. And it worked out about £300,000. And we all sat there and looked at each other and thought, bloody hell, that's a lot of money. We can do better. So as I alluded to earlier, that's actually about on the average for the UK hospitality industry. It's about 1/5 of the food we were purchasing. Talking to our good friends at RAP, they said that a 20% reduction in 12 months is a stretching but achievable target. So I went back to our ops team and I said, 20% of 300 grand, 60k. Would you like that back on your P&L next year? And they said, yes, we would. You've got our attention. So that was how we got the conversation started at a slightly more senior level. And then it's a case of trying to embed that message. As I say, things like the margin management masterclass Craig did, really getting the chefs in person, spending a whole day bringing this to life for them so they can go back and disseminate that to their teams and then bring it to life in their kitchens in turn, I think was really powerful. And I think it is also, whilst perhaps I'm appealing to the more senior colleagues in our business along the finance terms, the P&L terms, I never lose sight of the hearts and minds piece. This is emotional for a lot of us, and perhaps for the more junior members of those kitchen teams, the climate crisis is a much more powerful motivator than money. I'd like to think that's truer for a lot of us these days. So making sure that we can also talk in terms of, look, you are being part of something genuinely beneficial here. We know you're diligently sorting out your food waste and your recycling at home. Here is a much bigger lever for you to help pull. We've got 24 pubs across the country here. We can make a real impact when it comes to food waste. So making sure that messaging kept up throughout, and we were inspiring our colleagues, and I really think they rose to the challenge off the back of that.
Amazing, that's great, thank you.
We've got a couple of others through, and actually one feeds on quite nicely from that one around climate change. Have you started to notice food waste caused by climate change? I guess from kind of the hop side of things. And do you know what changing climate will look like in terms of how you've begun to quantify any of that food waste issues going through?
That's a really interesting question. So is the composition of food waste we see being affected by climate change, if I'm understanding the question correctly? I think because it's not an overnight thing, we're not seeing a sort of swing from one year to the next, if you like, in terms of the type of food waste that we're generating. I think that'll happen more gradually over time. I'm minded of a conversation I had with the head of Pizza Hut UK 2 years ago, who was saying that they were starting to invest in more heirloom varieties of grain because they know that they need a huge amount of wheat for the basis for their pizza. And with more extreme weather events on the way, and we're seeing those in real time, they knew there'd be more droughts, they knew there'd be more flash floods, and they needed grain varieties that had the root structure that could better withstand those extreme weather events. So that is great from an environmental point of view, but also from a commercial point of view, they were shoring up their supply chain, they were increasing their resilience. So it's more brewing than pubs, but we're working with our sister company Muntons, who supply a lot of the ingredients we grow from, to get involved in regenerative agriculture. And that's also true. We're working with companies like Wild Farms to get some of their regen ag flour into things like our bread rolls and our pizza bases. So I'm not quite answering the question. I think we're trying to respond to the climate crisis by evolving the ingredients that we are working with, is how I'd frame that one, I think. So ask me again in 5, 10 years if we're seeing different food waste pile up in our bins. The main thing for me I'm trying to drive down is just to keep the quantity down. That's the key thing at the moment before we get too nuanced about it.
Yeah.
So what was the second part of that question? So I'm not sure I've tackled that properly.
The second one was around do you kind of, have you foreseen what a changing climate will look like, and have you begun to quantify it?
Yeah, I think it's slightly grim reading, isn't it? But I think these extreme weather events are not going to get less frequent. I think there's a super El Nino weather event confirmed now. We're going to learn a lot over the next 18 months. Let's put it like that. It's going to bring a lot of stuff into relief. And I think we've had two things this year that I call flashpoints. One was Trump invading Iran and sending fuel prices shooting up, and the other is these recent heat waves, and especially the big one here in June. And those bring the climate crisis, unless you want to deny the climate crisis, but for the rest of us, they bring the climate crisis into relief. It's happening. It's on our doorstep. We're being affected right now. And we kind of need to leverage those flashpoints to build momentum and drive this messaging home and go, I'm sorry, guys, this isn't going away. Just because next week's not a heat wave doesn't mean the climate crisis is cancelled. This is a trend, and it's not a good trend. So it's up to us to put the brakes on it. And I think that's, since the start of this year is when we've signed off the capex to cover the roof of Brewpoint, our headquarters in solar panels. The CO2 recapture technology I mentioned earlier, we're looking at solar for more of our pubs. We're looking at on-site composting. We're already sending all of our food waste we do generate to anaerobic digestion. We're now doing the same for the spent grain and the spent yeast from our brew house. So the climate crisis is sort of bringing this work up the agenda in a darkly effective sort of way. And yeah, I think the value of this work is only going to increase in importance as time goes by. We're going to have more people going, what do we do next? And it's our job to have answers ready to those questions.
Thanks. And then we've got a final one going back to portion sizes. Have you done much on offering different portion sizes, free top-ups of chips, larger or smaller meal sizes? And how does this sit with commercial, if you've looked at doing that?
That's an excellent question. Because I talked about this with Tom, our commercial manager, and we had this, the debate, if you like. We certainly don't want customers to ever feel that they're being shortchanged. That's not what we're about. They come to the customers for a good time, possibly an indulgent time to the pub. It's not an everyday thing. So we don't want them feeling we're being frugal when they come in and spend Sunday lunch with their family in one of our pubs. So alongside this work, I've also last year finished an MSc in sustainability, and my thesis for that was all focused around food waste. So I did a survey with our customers, and it was interesting. I asked a lot of questions around this exact topic, and how would you feel presented with a range of options around, are you happy with portion size at the moment? If we offered you, whether it's smaller portion sizes, the option of a smaller portion size, just a range of different kind of possible solutions. And they came back and said loud and clear, portion sizes are often too large. It distresses us to see food waste in pubs. We don't just come to pubs and turn our brain off when it comes to the environment. We care, and we want to see you as an industry do better. And we would welcome at least the option of smaller portion sizes. So we've launched them, is the simple answer. About 12 months ago, we launched, especially for lunchtime trade. Because also, our fish and chips are incredible, but if I ate a hearty portion in one of our pubs, I'd probably be asleep for the rest of the afternoon. So on a purely practical note, having less calories to consume at lunchtime can be a breath of fresh air. So we found those have sold really well. The option, we've not stripped away the larger portion sizes, but you can buy a smaller portion at a proportionally smaller price, and our customers have really engaged with that. So an emphatic yes to that one.
Great. Yeah, good to see those options coming through for those who want it. That's everything I've had through on the Q&As, so back to Lindsay.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma. And thank you, Ed. I think the title of this Lunch and Learn, which was Why Should We Bother Looking at Food Waste? Ed, you've given us a fantastic insight into why we should bother looking at food waste, and also that there isn't one golden bullet that's going to fix it all, but collectively doing lots of different things has a massive impact. So yeah, thank you very much. If anybody has any other questions or anything, please feel free to get in contact. And that just leaves me to say thank you all for taking the time and enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.